It is a Sunday afternoon. July 14, 1974. Lake Sammamish State Park, Washington State. The temperature hits 82 degrees, a rare, bright gift for the Pacific Northwest. Families spread blankets on the grass. Children chase each other near the water's edge. The beach is alive with laughter, radios, the smell of sunscreen. Janice Ott is 23 years old. She's wearing a white bikini. She spread her yellow towel near the water and is reading a book, alone, enjoying the sun. She has plans with friends later. She has a husband. A life. A young man approaches her. He's wearing a sling on his arm, his elbow in a cast. He's handsome. He introduces himself. His name, he says, is Ted. He needs help. He says he can't quite manage his sailboat by himself. Would she mind? Witnesses later recall watching Janice smile, pack up her yellow towel, and walk away with the young man. She was never seen alive again. What is extraordinary? What makes this case unlike almost any other in American criminal history, is that 5 hours later, on that same beach, on that same afternoon, a different woman named Denise Naslund was approached by the same man. The same name. The same cast. The same sailboat story. She too walked away with him. 2 women. 1 afternoon. 1 man. 1 park full of witnesses who watched it happen. And not one person realized they had just seen a monster at work. This is the story of Theodore Robert Bundy. And the truth is darker, more methodical, and more chilling than even the headlines ever captured. He charmed everyone he met. 30+ women paid for it with their lives. Welcome back to Dark Case Files, where we follow the evidence, honor the victims, and never look away. Before we go further, today's case involves multiple homicides, sexual violence, and graphic forensic detail. We approach this story with care, and we will center the victims throughout. Now, to understand what Ted Bundy was, you first need to understand what he appeared to be. Because that gap, between appearance and reality, is exactly what made him so deadly. Ted Bundy was born November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. He grew up primarily in Tacoma, Washington. By every external measure, he was a success story: handsome, well-spoken, a psychology graduate from the University of Washington, a law student, a Republican Party volunteer in Washington state, and a crisis hotline counselor, where he sat beside a woman named Anne Rule who later wrote the defining book on his crimes. He had a long-term girlfriend. A good reputation. He was recommended for a position at the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission. The people who knew him didn't just fail to suspect him. They actively vouched for him. And that is the thing you need to hold onto for the next hour. Because what Ted Bundy understood, before anyone had a name for it, is that charm is the most dangerous weapon a predator can possess. The era matters too. This is the early to mid-1970s. Pre-cell phone. Pre-DNA forensics. Pre-national criminal database. A killer could drive across state lines and vanish into a new set of assumptions. Law enforcement in Washington had no way of knowing their cases were connected to cases in Utah, Colorado, or Florida. Ted Bundy knew that. He planned around it. Between 1974 and 1978, across Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, and Florida, he confessed, just before his execution, to 30 murders. Investigators believe the true number is higher. He was wrong about one thing, though. He thought he was too smart to be caught. He wasn't. To understand how Ted Bundy operated, you have to understand the mask he built. He was born illegitimate, a fact that caused profound shame in the 1940s. He was raised for several years believing his mother was his sister and his grandparents were his parents. When his mother eventually married John Bundy and the family relocated to Tacoma, young Ted struggled with that revelation, and with a growing sense that his life was built on a deception. But on the surface, Eagle Scout. Altar boy. Dean's List. His psychology professors described him as one of their most promising students. His girlfriend, Meg Anders, described a tender, attentive partner. And Rule, the true crime author who worked alongside him at a Seattle crisis hotline, later said she felt completely safe with him, that he was the kind of person you'd want if you were in trouble. That was not an accident. It was architecture. Bundy understood human expectations. He dressed the part, spoke the part, and weaponized the assumption that a good-looking, educated young man with a political future wasn't the kind of person you needed to worry about. The killing begins, Washington, 1974. The first confirmed disappearance linked to Bundy occurred on January 4, 1974, in Seattle. Karen Sparks, an 18-year-old student at the University of Washington, was attacked in her basement bedroom in the middle of the night. She survived, barely, with severe brain damage. She never fully recovered. 6 weeks later, on February 1, 1974, Linda and Healy. Linda was 21 years old. She was a UW student, a talented skier, and a part-time radio announcer for a university program. Her roommates thought she'd simply left for class. When they reported her missing, police found her bed neatly made, too neatly, they later realized. Someone had remade it. Her nightgown was still hanging in the closet, stained with blood. She had been taken from her own bed in the night. Between February and July 1974, 5 more young women vanished across Washington state. Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, Georgianne Hawkins. They were students, daughters, friends. They disappeared from college campuses, from parking lots, from their own neighborhoods. Some vanished so quietly that days passed before anyone knew they were gone. Investigators had no connective tissue. Different counties. Different jurisdictions. Nobody had yet assembled the full picture. Then came July 14, 1974. Lake Sammamish. The day everything cracked open. That Sunday at Lake Sammamish was the day Bundy made his first major mistake. He operated in the open. Introduced himself by name. Used a prop, the arm cast, that multiple witnesses independently remembered. And he didn't take one woman. He came back for a second. Janice Ott, 23, a caseworker for the King County Department of Public Assistance, left with him at approximately 12:30 p.m. Denise Naslund, 19, a UW student, disappeared from the same beach at approximately 4:30 p.m. There were witnesses. Over a dozen people spoke to police. Several had watched the men approach Janice. One woman had actually declined to go with Ted herself earlier that morning. He had made her feel, she said, slightly uneasy, and she had walked away. She called police the next day when she heard the news. For the first time, investigators across King County began comparing notes. The name, Ted. The brown Volkswagen Beetle. The descriptions that matched. Composite sketches were published in Washington newspapers. A tip line received over 3,000 calls. One of those calls came from Ann Rule, who mentioned her crisis hotline colleague fit the description. Another came from Meg Anders, Bundy's own girlfriend, who had called with her concerns twice before. Both tips were filed. Neither was acted on immediately. At the time, no one thought much of it. Thousands of tips, one name among many. Later, it would mean everything. The trail goes cold, then moves. By late 1974, Bundy had quietly relocated to Salt Lake City, Utah, to begin law school. Washington investigators didn't know that. Utah investigators didn't know about Washington. And in Utah, women started disappearing. Nancy Wilcox. Melissa Smith, the 17-year-old daughter of a local police chief. Laura M. And on November 8, 1974, a woman named Carol Duranch barely survived. Carol Duranch was the break that nobody recognized as a break yet. She was 18 years old. A man claiming to be a police officer, Officer Roseland, had approached her in a Salt Lake City shopping mall, told her someone had tried to break into her car, and convinced her to come with him to file a report. Inside his Volkswagen, he snapped a handcuff onto her wrist and lunged at her with a metal rod. She fought. She screamed. She got the door open and escaped. She had seen his face. She had survived. But it would be months before anyone connected Officer Roseland to Ted Bundy. On March 1, 1975, a forestry student hiking in the Cascade foothills near Issaquah, Washington stumbled across human remains. Investigators called to the scene found the skeletal remains of Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, the two Lake Sammamish victims, along with fragments belonging to two other women. And 5 miles away, on Taylor Mountain, more remains were eventually discovered. Linda Healy, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball. Detective Robert Keppel and Detective Roger Dunn of the King County Police had been working these cases for almost a year. What they were looking at now confirmed something they had suspected and dreaded: a single offender. One man. Multiple victims, spread across months, stored at dumping sites he had apparently selected in advance. This was organized. This was planned. Keppel later said that the Taylor Mountain site in particular suggested the offender had a familiarity with the terrain and intimate knowledge of those hills. They were looking for someone who'd spent time in those woods. By spring 1975, the investigation had formally expanded. Utah, Washington, and Colorado law enforcement began sharing information. Colorado had its own disappearances. Karen Campbell vanished from a ski resort in Snowmass in January 1975. Julie Cunningham, Denise Oliverson, Melanie Cooley. The pattern was consistent. Victims were young women, mostly white, often with long hair parted in the middle. They disappeared near college campuses or ski areas. Volkswagen Beetles appeared in witness accounts. The man described was polite, presentable, someone who inspired trust before he inspired fear. By mid-1975, a multi-state task force was quietly operating. Detective Keppel was among the first to suspect the cases were the work of one man moving across state lines, which, at the time, was an almost revolutionary investigative theory. But they still had no name they could charge. Until a routine traffic stop changed everything. On August 16, 1975, at approximately 2:30 a.m., Utah Highway Patrol Sergeant Bob Hayward was parked near his home in Granger, Utah, when he noticed a Volkswagen Beetle driving slowly through the residential streets with its headlights off. He pulled the car over. The driver was cooperative. Calm. Well-spoken. He gave his name as Theodore Robert Bundy. Hayward ran the plates. Nothing. He asked Bundy to pop the passenger seat. In a VW Beetle, the front passenger seat folded forward. What he found was odd: the seat had been removed entirely. Inside the car, a crowbar, rope, handcuffs, an ice pick, trash bags, a ski mask. Bundy said the handcuffs were from a dumpster. The tools were for a camping trip. Hayward wasn't satisfied. Bundy was taken in. When Salt Lake City detectives cross-referenced the arrest, they matched Bundy's Volkswagen to the vehicle described by Carol Duranch, the woman who had escaped, Officer Roseland, 9 months earlier. She was shown a lineup. She identified Ted Bundy without hesitation. After over a year, after disappearances in Washington, Utah, and Colorado, they finally had a name. The files in his apartment. Here is where things get strange. When investigators searched Bundy's Salt Lake City apartment, they found something they hadn't expected: maps. Detailed road maps of Colorado, with several locations circled, including the Aspen area where Karen Campbell had disappeared from the Wildwood Inn. They also found a brochure for a Colorado ski resort. And a receipt from a restaurant near the resort, dated the same weekend Karen Campbell vanished. Physical evidence. Tangible connections. But Bundy remained calm throughout questioning. Metal rod. She described the moment she wrenched open the door of his Volkswagen and ran. The jury deliberated for less than 7 hours. Guilty. Sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison. Investigators in Colorado, who had been building a murder case for the death of Karen Campbell, filed a request for extradition. It was granted. In January 1977, Bundy was transferred to Garfield County, Colorado, to stand trial for murder. This was the moment the state had him. This was when it should have ended. Instead, Ted Bundy jumped out a window. The first escape, Aspen, June 1977. On June 7, 1977, Bundy was in the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado, conducting legal research in the law library. He was temporarily unshackled, as a courtesy extended to him in his role as his own legal representative. He walked to a second-floor window. opened it, and jumped. He landed in a landscaped area, injuring his ankle, and limped into the mountains above Aspen. Search parties combed the terrain for 6 days. Roadblocks were set up across the county. On June 13, 6 days after his escape, a couple spotted a man stumbling along a road near Aspen Mountain, visibly disoriented. They called police. Bundy had been hiking through the mountains in dress shoes, had broken into a cabin and survived on stolen food, but had grown weak and confused. He was recaptured. He was returned to Garfield County Jail. Security was significantly upgraded. What happened next, investigators still find almost impossible to explain. The second escape, December 1977. Over several months, Ted Bundy, housed on the second floor of the Garfield County Jail, had obtained a hacksaw blade. He spent weeks quietly, methodically, working on a steel plate in the ceiling of his cell. The plate covered a crawlspace above the cell block. He lost weight deliberately, approximately 35 pounds, so he could fit through the gap. On the night of December 30, 1977, while most of the jail staff were on holiday leave, Bundy pushed through the ceiling plate, crawled through the crawlspace, dropped into the jailer's personal apartment above the cell block. The jailer and his wife were out for the evening, changed into civilian clothes, and walked out the front door. By the time the escape was discovered, nearly 17 hours later, he had stolen a car, driven it into the ground, and hitched his way to Denver. He boarded a flight to Chicago. Then a train to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Then a bus to Atlanta. And on January 8, 1978, Ted Bundy arrived in Tallahassee, Florida, where he rented a room a few blocks from Florida State University under the false name Chris Hagen. The question law enforcement was asking across 4 states, "Where is he?" would not be answered for 41 days. But what Bundy did during those 41 days in Florida is the most brutal chapter of the entire story. Florida, the Chi Omega attack. In the early morning hours of January 15, 1978, Ted Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. What happened inside is documented in court records, survivor testimony, and forensic evidence. It was a rampage, 15 minutes, multiple victims, a level of violence that shocked even experienced homicide investigators. Margaret Bowman, 21, and Lisa Levy, 20, were murdered in their beds. 2 other women, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, were badly beaten and survived. A 5th woman, Cheryl Thomas, was attacked in her apartment nearby and survived with permanent hearing loss and balance damage. FSU's campus was seized by terror. Students stopped going out alone. Sorority houses installed new locks. The university hired additional security. But there was evidence at Chi Omega that hadn't appeared in any of Bundy's previous crime scenes: bite marks. On Lisa Levy's body, investigators found a distinctive bite mark. A forensic signature as individual as a fingerprint. For the first time, investigators had biological, pattern-based evidence directly linking an offender to a scene. They didn't have the offender's name yet. But they had his teeth. The last victim, Kimberly Leach. On February 9, 1978, less than 4 weeks after Chi Omega, a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach was reported missing from Lake City, Florida. She had briefly returned to her middle school from the lunch area to retrieve her purse. A witness saw a man in a dark jacket leading her toward a white van. Kimberly Leach was the youngest of Bundy's confirmed victims. She would not be found until April. Ted Bundy, at this point still operating under a false identity in Tallahassee, was beginning to unravel. Witnesses reported him acting erratically. A stolen credit card was traced to gas stations across the Florida Panhandle. On February 12, 1978, Officer David Lee of the Pensacola Police Department ran the plates on a Volkswagen Beetle parked outside a Holiday Inn at 1 a.m. The plates came back stolen. He pulled the car over. The driver gave his name as Kenneth Meisner. Officer Lee asked him to step out of the car. Bundy bolted. Lee tackled him. In the struggle, Bundy said something that struck the officer as strange: "I wish you had killed me." His fingerprints confirmed his identity within hours. Ted Bundy, escaped convict, suspect in murders across 5 states, was in custody. It had taken 41 days. Throughout the years of investigation, families had lived in suspension, not knowing where their daughters were, whether the bones recovered were theirs, waiting for answers that came in fragments. Eleanor Rose, Linda Healy's mother, told investigators she had refused to believe the remains on Taylor Mountain were her daughter's until she had no other option. The Naslund family learned their daughter was dead in a September 1975 press conference, 8 months after she'd vanished. Carol Duranch, the woman who escaped and testified and helped put Bundy in a Utah cell, she later said that watching Bundy's escapes unfold on the news had been its own form of trauma. She had believed, for a while, that it was over. That she was safe. The second escape told her otherwise. There was one more person paying attention to all of this. A woman in Seattle named Ann Rule, who had already started writing a book about the case. Without yet knowing that the men she had worked beside on a crisis hotline was the same men investigators were hunting. When the picture finally became undeniable, she kept writing. She said later, "I'm glad I didn't know. Because if I had known, I wouldn't have believed it." Ted Bundy faced 2 separate trials in Florida. Trial 1, the Chi Omega murders, Miami, June-July 1979. The trial was the first in American history to be televised nationally. Bundy, who had fired his public defenders and insisted on representing himself, played to the cameras. Commentators remarked on his poise, his legal maneuvering, his charm even in a defendant's dock. He tried to suppress the bite mark evidence. He failed. Dr. Richard Sovereign, an odontologist, presented a dental mold of Bundy's teeth alongside photographs of the bite marks found on Lisa Levy's body. To the jury, to anyone watching, the match was unmistakable. The moment many observers say sealed the verdict came when Dr. Sovereign placed the mold against the photographs and said, simply, "They fit." The jury deliberated for less than 7 hours. On July 23, 1979, Ted Bundy was found guilty on all counts. The judge, Edward Cowart, delivered the sentence, death. And then, in a moment that many found deeply unsettling, Judge Cowart addressed Bundy directly. He said, "You're a bright young man. You'd have made a good lawyer. I'd have liked to have you practice in front of me. But you went another way, partner. It's a tragedy for this court to see such a total waste of humanity." Bundy thanked him. In January 1980, Bundy was tried separately for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach in Lake City, Florida. A witness placed him near her school. Fibers from Kimberly's clothing were found in the stolen van associated with Bundy. A pantyhose mask was recovered linking him to the scene. And then, to the astonishment of the courtroom, in the middle of his own murder trial, Bundy asked to address the court. He proposed to the woman who had been visiting him in jail, Carol Ann Boone. Under Florida law at the time, a verbal declaration of marriage in open court constituted a legal marriage. The judge acknowledged it. Ted Bundy, on trial for the murder of a 12-year-old girl, got married. It was the performance of a man who still believed he was the smartest person in any room. He was convicted. Sentenced to death, again. For nearly a decade after his convictions, Bundy remained on Florida's death row, filing appeals, granted stays. As execution dates approached and legal options ran out, investigators from multiple states began approaching him, because there were still open cases, still victims without names, still families without answers. Bundy used this as leverage, feeding detectives partial information in exchange for delay. Detective Robert Keppel, who had hunted Bundy from the beginning in King County, Washington, conducted extensive interviews with him in the final months. Keppel later described the experience as sitting across from someone who discussed his crimes with clinical detachment, as if he were recounting someone else's history. On January 23, 1989, the night before his execution, Bundy gave a final interview to Dr. James Dobson. He blamed pornography. He blamed his upbringing. He framed himself as a product of forces beyond his control. Keppel, who had spent 15 years building the case against him, was not moved. On the morning of January 24, 1989, at 7:16 a.m., Ted Bundy was executed by electric chair at Florida State Prison in Stark, Florida. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison, a crowd had gathered. When the announcement was made, they cheered. He had confessed to 30 murders. Investigators believe the actual number is higher. Possibly significantly higher. Several cases remain open. Several families still don't have full answers. 30 is the number he gave them. 30 is the floor, not the ceiling. And Rule's book The Stranger Beside Me was published in 1980 while Bundy was still appealing. It became a defining text in the true crime genre, and one of the first mainstream accounts to grapple seriously with how a predator could exist so close to ordinary life. Carol Durange, the woman who got away, later said she had spent years rebuilding. That she had spent years angry not just at Bundy, but at a system that had received tips about him and filed them away. The King County investigation became a model for multi-jurisdictional serial homicide cases. Robert Keppel's methodology, developed during the Bundy years, directly informed the investigation of subsequent serial offenders. The term serial killer, popularized in the years after Bundy's capture, owes some of its definitional structure to what investigators learned hunting him. He was not a monster from another world. He was a man who understood this one far too well. Linda and Healy was 21 years old. She grew up in the Seattle area, loved skiing, had a gift for radio, and was working toward a future that would never come. Janice Ut was 23. She worked with families in crisis. She was someone who helped people for a living. Denise Naslund was 19. She was studying to be a computer programmer at a time when that field was just opening up. Kimberly Leach was 12 years old. She went back to get her purse. There are 26 more names on the list he gave. And possibly more he didn't. And represent himself and smile for cameras. They deserved better. And they have not been forgotten. Ted Bundy was executed January 24, 1989. The state of Florida closed its cases upon execution. Several victims in Washington, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho remain unidentified or have open investigative questions. If you have any information related to any open cases connected to Ted Bundy's confirmed timeline, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Adults maintains active records. Thank you for spending this hour with me. These stories are heavy. The responsibility of telling them, accurately, carefully, with the victims at the center, is not something I take lightly. If this video moved you, hit subscribe. It tells the algorithm this kind of careful, detailed work is worth more of your time. Drop a comment. Is there a case you think deserves the same level of attention? I read every single one. And if you're new here, welcome. This is what we do. Until next time, stay curious. Stay safe.